It is time for the final song of Volume 1 of Stories from STYX, which is There Is No Name. Now, again, I have been told that we are getting multiple sides to this Hades and Persephone story and different viewpoints on it. So we've had Crossroads and My Persephone, which lean into the introspection of Persephone, as well as kind of Hades Persephone as a, we'll call it a love story, though a tentative one at that. I very much appreciated how My Persephone was really just her having an honest conversation with him that I am not a doormat, I am not going to be some idol, I'm not gonna, just be some little pretty figure that, sits still, looks pretty on a chair. I expect to be a queen and I expect to be able to make decisions and have a sense of autonomy, which I think, given how little autonomy she has likely had in her life up to that point, I think is pretty cool, and I really did love it a lot. It was a lot gentler than I thought it was going to be. Maybe it's just because I came off Crossroads, which was just like my mind, and then I was like, oh, it's a nice little gentle calm down. So next we have There Is No Name, which I have to assume is the Demeter song. I have to assume this is the Demeter's pissed at the world, Demeter is raging, Demeter is just like, screw humanity because the father of my child gave her away in marriage and didn't ask me song. I have no idea what to expect. So let's just go.
There are always more sides to the story. Not everyone considers the story of Hades and Persephone a happy ending.
A child that loses their parent is an orphan. A spouse that loses their love is a widow.
Yeah, the child that loses their parent is an orphan, a spouse that loses their love is a widow or widower. But what do you call a parent who has lost a child? There is no name for it. Okay, I see what the title means. I get it. I love these, they're almost like arpeggios that are going very minor, which makes them feel very, very sad, very kind of dark. Ooh, okay.
You may have gained a husband.
Oh.
But I am left here in the shadow.
You may have gained a husband. Interesting that she addresses that at Persephone. That's dark. And I also understand why I was warned about this song gently. Not in any like, oh my god, you might have the same reaction that you did to I'm Not Sorry for Loving You. That's what it was. But I was warned a bit about some of the content potentially of this song, very gently. I'm glad I got that warning, but also like, ooh, that's... I'm now curious how we're playing Demeter here. Because there's a route that could be taken. I'm very curious. And these, dark ascending and descending behind her really adds. I'll then say, if I seem to get tense during this song, I have my own things going through my mind.
There is no name for a mother losing a child, but there is a name for a God who keeps running wild.
Assuming that has to be Zeus. Because Hades doesn't. Oh.
I will rip through the realm till there's nothing but pain. Demeter, they say, why sinners bane? But the bastards and
Interesting. I do kind of wish there was a bit more grit and growl coming from the singer. It could be that because this is the first verse, we're gonna wait till we keep going. Like, I would expect her to be really raging, especially when it's, I will rip through the realm till there's nothing but pain. I mean, rip through the realm is, that's a great phrase, but it's very violent. I'd want to feel a bit more of that. There is no name for God keeps running wild. This has to be related to Zeus. Again, Hades has really almost no solo mythology outside of the instance of Persephone, and he just generally does not get involved with just about anything unless Zeus asks. And again, the one time Hades becomes proactive and asks for something. Again, he goes about it the right way. He goes to his brother, who is the father of the woman who he wishes to take as his wife, but who is also the king of the gods. And it's very important that you get that Zeus pretty much be like, A-okay with what you're doing. So technically he, again, by the morals of the time, you could argue he did nothing wrong. But of course everybody does recognize the pain that Demeter feels, mainly because she then, as the gods are wont to do, takes it out on everything and everyone. And yeah, so Demeter, they say, why see it as bane? Like, what's the big deal? Your kid got married. And she's like, well, I don't like it. And that's kind of part of the thing. As much as she says, well, it's all these other gods, they're terrible. I'm like, okay, Hades has like 0 track record though. None. There's no track record for Hades. Like, annoyed at Zeus, I can get. If it were Poseidon, hey, again, Poseidon seems to have a healthy, you know, ethically non-monogamous relationship over there, but like, Hades has no track record. You have nothing for him. And it's like, yeah, it's sad she's a queen down there, but some of the other gods are definitely gonna be looking at it like, aren't you reacting a little strongly about this? You know, because in that way, again, because multiple things can be true at once, you can make the argument that Demeter doesn't see Persephone as an individual. She views Persephone in an unhealthy way as a part of her. So Persephone does not have her own identity. She is Demeter's daughter. It's extremely toxic. It's essentially the behavior of a narcissistic parent. And again, that can also be true that Persephone was taken against her own will. All of these things can very much be true. But it is Demeter's reaction where it's not really about Persephone, it's that something was taken from her and that she feels she owns Persephone. Again, all of these sides very true at once. I'm very curious again to see how we're going to do Demeter here.
Leaders, they all fight to gain my Persephone.
Okay, but Hades, a bastard and a cheater? He's not, though. And again, the my Persephone.
He defiled her. He stole her. He gave her no choice. How are you all okay with this? I beg you, please hear my voice. I will not be convinced. I will not stand here flinched. The fates scream for vengeance, but I barely pay.
There's the grit.
There is no name.
Yeah, he defiled her, he stole her, he gave her no choice. Again, all of these things can absolutely be true. At the same time, how are you all okay with this? I beg you hear my voice. How are you all okay with this? Well, Zeus okayed it, and he is her father, and he's the king of the gods. That's his right and prerogative. Again, you can also, from a very modern perspective, look at that and say, well, that's very fucking unfair. Yes, but understand in the ancient times, in a highly patriarchal society, frankly, women weren't even seen as people, they were property. The whole idea of the institution of marriage was a woman passed from being the property or under the protection of her father, and possibly and or siblings, and became the property of, / was under the protection of, now her husband. But because Demeter is a goddess, she has the ability to cause massive fucking consequences all over the place because she is upset. I will say the fates scream for vengeance, though.
Casper.
You probably would want to use the Furies and not the Fates. In terms of goddesses of vengeance, you are thinking of the Erinyes, aka the Eumenides, what we would call the Furies. And these are absolutely goddesses where if they, especially with humans, if somebody has died and they felt that death was unjust, the Furies can essentially kind of be summoned and will torment people left alive. And so the idea that Demeter would scream for vengeance, it wouldn't be the Fates. It would be the Furies, because it just, especially with that wording. So that's my one little... Probably would want to use the Furies instead of the Fates. The Fates don't usually scream for vengeance. Like, that's not normally something they do. And while you can have massive conversations about essentially the battle, or the uncomfortable existence together, coexisting of basically fate, prophecy, free will, and things like the will of Zeus, because all three of those things kind of exist together very uncomfortably. Part of the idea is that while there's not rigid determinism, aka fate is something that can kind of be flexible, truly defying it will often risk chaos. It's a very sort of depends on the situation thing. As with much of Greek mythology, it very much depends on the situation. There's very few blanket statements you can make at times. and the argument of fate and free will and the will of Zeus, which are three very different things. Because free will usually referring to a mortal's free will. If you read the Iliad, is a massive part of that story, and it is. Oh, it gives you a headache trying to detangle it. Jesus, Tegan! No. I don't have time for you, Zeus. I don't have time for you right now. Wait. Jesus! Casper, that's just mean. That's just mean.
What in the fuck?
I also find it interesting for a god who's running wild. Initially, I thought she was talking about Zeus. She might be talking about herself, Demeter here, because she does basically run wild. And the earth deeply suffers for it, which, again, very uncomfortable part of that. Damn. But okay. Okay. She will reflect me and who I am inside this fiery shell of chaos spawned by, am I at a crossroads? Basically their perspectives. Okay, yeah, so we've basically gotten Persephone's perspective, Hades' perspective, and we're now getting Demeter's. Very interesting. I do appreciate that all these perspectives are ultimately pretty, initially sort of self-centered. Which there is a sort of, the phrase that I've seen used, is furious self-absorption, which is how you describe essentially the attitudes of the gods. They are ultimately wholly obsessed with themselves and the execution of their own wills, desires, and that means their powers. And what Demeter is doing here, in many ways, is still that very furious self-absorption, in that she does not care about the collateral damage that will come from her raging over the fact that she didn't get a say in who her daughter married. And again, yes, equally, Persephone was taken technically without her own personal consent, but again, by the rules of the time, her consent wasn't necessary. When it came to a god giving her in marriage to another god, again, Zeus gave his permission. Again, there's a lot of, again, but ifs, but technicallys, and multiple sides to the story. It's what makes it one that is ripe for study and discussion.
Crops are dying.
Yeah, brought an eternal winter. She's a harvest goddess, so she wasn't letting anything happen.
Rock god of thunder, if I'm not mistaken, that's what you told me when my daughter was taken.
The king and the queen of Hades.
Oh, the muse singing.
Knew what it meant when Zeus here was to throw. For Core knew deep down she missed her mom, but also loved the girl she'd become. A deal was made for them to share. A deal was made for those who care. For part of the year she would stride in the sun, but the rest of rotations would take place in the worldly conditions.
Yet there is no name for a mother losing her child, but there is a name for a brother in denial, for the bastard and cheater. He had all to gain. My Persephone was the one who was slain.
Interesting. Again, It seems she's referring to Zeus, because bastard and cheater, you can't be talking about Hades. I mean, there's just, you can't, because there's nothing there to reference for either of those words. I mean, she might call him a bastard if she's mad at him, but also, he had all to gain. What does Zeus gain by letting Hades marry Persephone and take her as a queen? Nothing, really. Other than, yay, I guess the underworld has a queen. Again, part of the thing is that Hades is so inactive in terms of, like, almost Olympian politics. Like, he does not get involved unless Zeus says, brah, I need you. At which point he shows up and he's like, what you need, brah? What you need? I'm here for you. Other than that, he pretty much just minds his own business down in the underworld. I mean, the only other times he gets involved would be Orpheus, that famous story, and then also Theseus and Pirithous. Those dumbasses, which if you don't know that story, Theseus, yes, Theseus from Theseus and the Minotaur, and his idiot friend Pirithous, because they were both descended in gods from some way, decided they deserved extremely high-ranking brides. So Theseus kidnapped Helen of Sparta before she was married, kidnapped her, so she's really quite young at this point, and took her to his home city in Athens, and then dipped off with his friend Pirithous to get his bride, who he thought he deserved. And you know who he thought he deserved? Persephone. That dumbass motherfucker said, oh, I deserve Persephone as my wife. Yeah, how well do you think that went down when they got to the entrance to the underworld? The best part was they weren't even entertained. Like, Hades was like, oh, that's what you think. Okay. Well, you know, why don't you sit down on this bench over here and we'll talk about it? And it's like kind of right at the entrance to the underworld. So they sit down and find they can't get up. And they are stuck there until eventually Heracles ends up freeing Theseus, because it's when he's doing his labor, I believe, with Cerberus. So he frees Theseus, but when he tries to free Pirithous, like, the earth shakes. It's made very clear, you're not letting this motherfucker go. He dared to think that a goddess should be his wife and he was going to steal her, the queen of the underworld. Like, are you fucking kidding? No. So that's what Theseus got to go back and found bad things that happened in Athens while he was gone, which is kind of his own fucking fault. Yeah, so those are really the only, like, kind of, again, besides the story of Persephone, the only major myths where he kind of really figures. He sort of figures in one of the myths of Sisyphus, I believe, and he might pop in to lend an object every now and then, but most of the time, nah, he's just chilling. So yeah, a lot of Demeter's rage here is interesting. Like, obviously rage that her child was taken, but so much of this is mostly the fact that she didn't get a say. Again, there's a furious self-absorption here that is. It's very Homeric. It's very appropriate to the gods, actually, and I quite like it. And what I find most interesting is I frankly don't feel very bad for Demeter in this song. Now, a lot of that could come from my own personal history and the like, but even then, usually I can have an element of sympathy for Demeter, and I can go, no, that is sad, I do feel for you, but I'm also understanding, again, furious self-absorption. I keep using that phrase because it's a great phrase. They are so self-involved. And so much of even the lyrics here are showcasing it's, my Persephone was not someone they could claim, because I claimed her. She's mine. And there's no discussion at the idea of Persephone. With Demeter, there's no, like, she and Persephone aren't having clearly any sort of discussions. She's just, and you will live in this bubble, and that bubble will be your home, and nobody else will have you. It's selfish. It's toxic as hell. We never said any of these relationships were healthy, let's be real. And don't look to Greek mythology necessarily for healthy relationships or any sort of relationship goals. No, don't. Seriously, don't. But that was interesting. There were moments where I wondered if we were going to send Demeter, like, up the octave and push her higher just to really get her to rage. I felt like it still was a bit restrained, and that's just my personal taste. Like, for me, I'm like, no, I'm okay with somebody going even slightly out of tune if they're raging that hard, and, like, scream shouting and shit. But I'm fine. That's a personal taste thing. I don't think that's a criticism of anything related to music. But that's it. We are done with Volume 1 of Stories from STYX. Holy shit. I am not sure if next I'm going to go back and do I know there's official animatics for this, if I'm going to do those, or if I do understand that Volume 2 has just recently released, or if I go straight into that. I haven't decided, so it'll be basically a surprise, because I don't know yet. I'm not sure yet. I haven't made up my mind. Go figure. I have no plan. I skate along pretending I have a plan, but I have no plan. I do have Peg, though. Are you having fun? But yeah, wow. I have to say, Casper, this was a nerdy little delightful trip down mythology lane. So many great references. Like, I think only two things where I was like, which one was the technically something I was told that's not necessarily confirmed by this, which was the whole thing about Mnemosyne. And also in this one with saying the Fates cry out for vengeance. The Furies is really what should be said there. But like, that's small nitpicks. Really? Most of this has just been delightful. I've just gotten to nerd out gloriously. Ah, what a great time. Also, you shoved in so many genres that I loved and unexpectedly, and also Tegan's voice continues to just amaze and mildly terrify me in good ways. Ah, what a treat.